Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. It's time for another release ranking video and the first one for Phoenix in a little while since they didn't announce anything in February due to the Chinese New Year, and this set is the March set. Now, the January set that I did do a video for has still not had the models arrive on the scene, and that's not too surprising. Phoenix usually take a couple of months to get announcements to production. But I wasn't overly complimentary about that set anyway, because it did contain a lot of retailer requests, and frankly, those requests weren't particularly good in my opinion. But this set is a return to form for Phoenix. A lot more interesting diversity. You've got some brand new aircraft, you've got some older aircraft, and you've got some re-releases on modern Phoenix molds that haven't been made for a long time. So there's a good degree of interest to be had no matter what you're collecting in this set, whether you're collecting modern aircraft, slightly older ones, or from different geographic regions. And that's what I like to see with these sort of release sets. So we've got 21 models to look through in this Phoenix set, and we will get onto that in just a second. Obviously, as I always do, please chuck a like on the video if you're enjoying the content, and subscribe to the channel here at YouTube, and don't forget my other social media platforms as well. I'm on Instagram at Yesterday Airlines and on Facebook too, and yesterdaysairlines.com. Recent work that I've done has been a video on the YouTube channel here, having a look at some new arrivals at Jinlong. So if you haven't seen that video yet, check that out to have a look at some of those new models arriving. I've also just written a review at the website covering a 3D design deck Air Southwest -8 300, which is a lovely little model and showing really where I think we're going for a lot of these new generation models, moving towards new technologies, and I think 3D design deck are doing some great stuff. So check out that review, it's a lovely little model. But now let's get on and see what Phoenix are offering us up in this March set, which presumably will be here probably around May time. Okay, so we'll look at these in the usual Airbus, Boeing and other business order. But first up, I just wanted to do a couple models out of sequence, and that is the pair of Delta Airlines 100 years liveried Airbuses. So we've got the A321neo N589 Delta Tango and the A350 N527 Delta November, both wearing this quite attractive 100 years of Delta livery. The reason I've kind of pulled these out is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's guaranteed that literally everyone is going to make these. I think they've already been announced by Panda, and possibly by NG as well, I can't quite remember. And obviously they will get made by Gemini Jets too. And Phoenix are announcing this month here. It also wouldn't surprise me to see the A350 come out from AV400 at some point too. So they're going to get made by literally everyone in the scale. And this is a great example of where you kind of pick your poison, which one's your favourite, which version is best in terms of the colour reproduction, and which one is best in terms of the mould. The other reason I pulled this one out is because Gemini has been busy advertising their ties to Delta Airlines, and talking about, you know, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, buy from us because our models are officially licensed and Delta likes us, as if that's a good reason for a collector to buy models. It isn't. Licensing really does very little for the quality of the models. I've seen it hundreds of times. Licensed models have just as many mistakes as those that are unlicensed, and the licensing has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the end product. I've worked with a variety of airlines and manufacturers, and the licensees really don't care. They mainly just clip in the ticket and making the prices higher for the consumer. So, you know, take from that as you will. If you want to buy licensed products, knock yourself out. If you don't want to buy unlicensed products, it's entirely up to you. But from where I'm standing, I can tell you it has no impact on the quality of the release. Now, in terms of these two, in terms of the Phoenix versions of these, they're not going to be the best quality, because both the A320 and the A350 mold that Phoenix use are not the best moulds on the market. Now that is not a controversial thing to say. They're both okay, they are not spectacular. Phoenix has made some changes to both these moulds over the years, and they have at least got the right wing on the Neo with the sharklets. So that is good, but the mould is not spectacular, and neither is the A50. And you know, the Panda and NG versions are clearly going to be better than these. And these ones will probably be, you know, pretty much the same sort of level as the ones that Gemini will make, I'd have thought. So I'm going to put these two into Workhorse. You know, they're perfectly fine, but they're not going to be the best ones that get made of the many of these that get made. Okay, cool. Now we've got that out of the way, let's move on and look at the rest of the batch, which are a lot more interesting. First up, we've got an Edelweiss Airbus A320 HB. Juliet Lima is the registration of this model. It is wearing the current updated scheme from Edelweiss, which basically is quite similar to the old scheme but has less, well, Edelweiss on it. It doesn't have the big flower on the front fuselage, and it does have slightly smaller billboard titles, and it has a Lufthansa Group titling on the rear of the aircraft as well. So it is not the first time there has been an Edelweiss A320 made in the scale. Dragon Wings made the old colours a long time ago, 2001, so that must be one of the earliest releases, and no doubt it looked pretty poor because the Dragon A320's not great. There has also been a Phoenix version which was made in 2016, and that is more like this current modern scheme, but the titles are larger and it doesn't have the Lufthansa Group stuff on the back end. And that looks perfectly reasonable. And this one is the first current livery A320 that's been made. So there've really only been those three. There was also another Phoenix version which had a special scheme on it too. So altogether there have been four. Three of them have been from Phoenix. There's not a lot of competition. The Phoenix A320 clearly not the best on the market, but what are you going to do? It's the only one that's really available. I'm going to put this one into Workhorse mainly because of the mould. It's not going to be, again, it's not going to be a bad model, but I do myself generally try and avoid the Phoenix A320. Now, much better than the A320 is the A330 and A340 offerings that Phoenix have, though I have to say I wasn't loving the undercarriage and wing fit on the last A330-200 I got from Phoenix. But the next two are both really cool and interesting and colourful airlines, so that does elevate their interest quite a lot. The first one up is Boliviana de Aviación. It's a CP3214. This one has got a different tail logo to, or actually it's not technically not the tail logo, different rear fuselage logo to the previous release, which was CP3209. That one had the bird logo on the rear of the fuselage. I'm not entirely sure what kind of bird it is. Is it a Quetzal maybe? Not sure. This one, however, has not got the bird on the rear fuselage. It instead has a rather attractive jaguar on the rear of the fuselage. It's a really cool scheme anyway, and it's really nice to have different variants of it. I'm always rather cool and excited by airlines that tweak the liveries on different aircraft in the fleet, and this one is quite a cool and nice idea. Nice to have two different variants of the same scheme. So I think this one's going to look really good. I do like the Phoenix A330 as not quite as good maybe as the NG version, and NG did make the previous one, though I believe they messed up the underbody aspect of it. It will be interesting to see how this looks. I think it'll look good. It's not one for me, but I do like it. I'm going to put this one into High Flyer. Similarly, the next release is for a nation and an airline that has previously only had a single release in 400 scale, and that is Maldivian. So it's for the Maldives, and this is also an A330-200. This time round, the reg is 8Q India Alpha Bravo. Previously, Phoenix had made an A320 8Q India Alpha November, and they made that in 2014, so quite a long time ago. It is really nice to see more unusual airlines and more diverse airlines, and the Maldives has got a national carrier with a very attractive livery. You've got this dolphin splashing out of the water on the tail, big Maldivian titles. It looks really nice. So again, I'm going to put this one up in high flyer as well. Little bit concerned about the finishing on the undercarriage on the mould here. Doesn't seem to be quite as good as it used to be, but really nice scheme. The last A330 for this month is in the colours of Swiss, and it is registered HB Juliet Hotel Foxtrot. Now, the Swiss livery is pretty boring, and there's nothing special about this release. It's just a standard Swiss scheme. It's been made a couple of times before. NG made HB Juliet Hotel Charlie in 2019, and Aero Classics made Juliet Hotel Bravo in 2016. So there have been a few releases previously. It's not doing much for me, and it's been made a couple of times before, so I'm just going to put this one into a workhorse. Okay, now we move on to the A340s, and I have to say that if I've got concerns with some of the Phoenix A330s, I don't have it with the 340s, which have generally looked excellent. And I've said before, I think on previous videos, that I've been picking up quite a few of these releases: Kuwait, Egypt, Air Mauritius, Air Lanka. I've got all of those. Really nice set of models, and really pleased with them. So what we've got this month coming from Phoenix in the A340 spot is one of each of the three variants, the 300, 500 and 600. The Series 300 is Iberia. The registration is EC Golf Lima Echo. Now, the cool thing about this is it's wearing the very earliest delivery scheme variant of the livery. Iberia's beautiful classic scheme, which is so much better than that current bland livery they have. The big difference in the scheme between this one and the slightly later variant of the same livery is the nose cone. This one's got the little black tip nose cone. It makes it look a little bit more retro. There have been previous Iberia 340s in the scheme, but none of them had the black nose cone tip. In 2023, Aero Classics released a version, ECGGS. Yeah, it looked okay. It's not ripping up any trees, but it looked okay. In 2017, Iberia did ECGUP. I actually did review that model back in my diecast flyer days, and again, it was nice. It was perfectly good. I personally don't think that the Gemini mold is quite as good as the Phoenix version, mainly because the undercarriage is a bit short, but it was a nice enough model. But as I say, it's not the same scheme as this because it doesn't have the black nose cone, which does surprisingly change the look of the aircraft quite a lot. Really think this will be really quite a nice model. It's one that I'm quite tempted to get, but it just slightly slipping out of my criteria, and to be honest, I just don't have room in my 90s European shelf for it. But that's not going to stop me from putting it up into Supersonic. I think this is a really cool release. I think it'll be a lovely model, and hell, I might get it. I have to see. Next up, we've got a Singapore Airlines A340-500, registered 9V Sierra Golf Charlie. Once again, it's not the first time Phoenix has made Singapore A340-500. The most recent release was in November 2022, but that one was in the early version of the scheme, which had the leadership titles and much smaller main titles, which were further back on the aircraft. This one has got the big Singapore Airlines titles, and they got rid of the aircraft leadership name. So it's slightly different to the one that was made 3 years ago, but it is effectively the same as one that was made 11 years ago by Phoenix. They made 9V SG Echo in 2014 wearing this scheme. But that is a long, long time ago in a land far, far away, to be honest. And even looking at that, it looks like maybe the nacelle colour of the engines was different. So, again, I think this is actually a really good and strong release choice. It's a very attractive scheme. Really like the Singapore scheme. Looks even better on the A340. It's a great mould. And I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. And our last A340 this month from Phoenix is in the colours of Virgin Atlantic. It is registered G Victor Yankee Oscar uniform, and it is wearing the earliest livery worn by A340-600s, which has that dark purpley outline to the tail colours. I actually really like the scheme. I probably like the scheme more than the later liveries that have been worn by the 340-600 in the Virgin scheme. And what does surprise me, looking back through a list of 19 or 18 other releases of version A34600s, is how very few of them have been released wearing this original scheme. You have to go back all the way to 2004, I think, to find one. There are several old Gemini and Dragon releases from way back when, which were released in this. So it's been a long, long time since this scheme has been made. And of course, the Phoenix A340-600 is the best in the business by some distance. It doesn't have a lot of competition, I admit. I mean, there is that new HX Models mould, but I've yet to see it in person, and I haven't been enormously convinced by the undercarriage length or the cockpit printing on it so far. So, yeah, I might try and get hold of one of those, see how that competes in hand. But at the moment, I think the Phoenix is still out in the lead by some distance. This is going to be another great release. Again, surely a livery is quite sought after on an excellent mould. It's exactly the sort of thing which I've been applauding Phoenix for now for the last couple of years. And once again, I'm going to do that here. Again, I think this is a supersonic model, really good. And finishing off our Airbuses for this month, we have a Qantas A380. It is VH Oscar Quebec Foxtrot, and it is wearing the current scheme. There have been a couple of other Qantas A380s recently. AV400 made a very nice model in late 2023. Gemini made a much inferior version the year before. I say that because their mould is just nowhere near as good. And I think that Phoenix themselves made a version also in 2021. They made VH Oscar Quebec Golf. So this is the second Phoenix release of a modern Qantas A380, but like the Singapore Airlines, I feel that it's a model which will sell well, and there's almost certainly demand for it. I think the AV400 ones aren't particularly easy to find, and I would imagine this will do quite nicely. And the Phoenix mold still holds its own, I feel. It's not quite as good as the AV400, not quite as good as the HX models, but it's still holding its own. Still a decent mold. I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. So that's all the Airbuses wrapped up for this month, and we move on into Boeing territory. And we start with a couple of 737-800s. Now, I really don't rate the Phoenix 737-800. It's a very old mould. It's just kind of ground hugs. The engine's wrong, and the nose isn't great. The undercarriage is poor. It's not as bad as it has been, but I really don't rate it. It's a mould I definitely avoid, and I can't say that the subject matter here is particularly exciting me either. We've got a Garuda Indonesia example, PK Golf Uniform Golf in a Ben's World scheme, and we've got an ultra bland Japan Airlines JA317 Juliet. And neither of those doing much for me, even before I get to a substandard mould. So I'm going to put both of those down into gas guzzler, and let's get on into the wide bodies, where things are looking a lot better. The next model is Air Pacific. So Air Pacific, that is of Fiji, and it is a 767-300 Delta Quebec Foxtrot Juliet Charlie is the registration. And I know I've talked a little bit about how quite a lot of the Phoenix molds are approaching obsolescence and there are better versions available. And that's definitely the case with the 767-300 mold they have. But the mold is still solid, still looks good, and still presents well. And the reality is that I just can't see Panda models ever getting to release an Air Pacific version, unless someone literally made them, paid them to do it. They're just not going to do it off their own bat. And I can't see NG getting to this either. So it's all very well and good to say, well, Phoenix isn't my first choice for 767s anymore. That's a true statement. But when you look at the diversity that Phoenix is putting out in comparison to other brands that have better molds, it's not comparable. Phoenix is doing a better job in that regard. So this still, to me, feels like an excellent, excellent release. Well, I almost certainly will get this one. Really liking the look of this, and I'm going to put this one up into supersonic. Next, we've got a 777-300 ER. Can't say this one's particularly thrilling me, and I've already talked about it in the JC Wings announcement set. which does have an impact on my ranking of this version. It's T-Way Air. I talked about this quite positively last video, I think it was, for the JC HL8706. Don't hate the scheme, don't really care too much for the airline, admittedly, but I do think the JC Wings 777 is better than the Phoenix one, so I would probably wait out that version or look to see if someone else was going to make it rather than get the Phoenix one myself. So not particularly thrilled by this one. I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse. That leaves us with a trio of Dreamliners to fill out the rest of the Boeings. The first one up is the sort of model, again, that Phoenix have been making more of recently, interesting governmental aircraft, and this one is a 7878 that is flying for the Uzbekistani government. The reg is UK001. Now, Uzbekistan does have these really cool usage of the national flag colours on both the national carrier, Uzbekistan Airways, and also on these government aircraft, got the blue and the green. And it looks pretty cool. And it looks quite stately. You've got the flag on the tail. It does look slightly different to the airline. And I do like the look of this, I have to say. And if you're a collector of government airlines, then, you know, these sort of models are a shoo-in. And I'm not, but I am, as always, tempted. And I'm going to try and avoid. But I do like the look of this one. And Phoenix have improved their 787 mould in recent times. I presume this will have the modified wings on it, and it should look decent. I'm going to put this one up into High Flyer. Joining that in High Flyer is TAAG Angola, who have just accepted their first 787-9, and the aircraft is registered D2 Tango Echo Quebec. And this is one of those new liveries where they've slightly dumbed down the original scheme. It perhaps doesn't look as good as it used to, but it isn't offending me anywhere near as much as that new Korean Air livery. So, yeah, the antelope on the tail doesn't look as cool as it did. The titles don't look as nice, but it isn't dreadful. It isn't dreadful. And I'm a sucker for African flag carriers. They always add a little colour and interest to your model airport. And this is actually an airline that would go really well on Jinglong. Will anyone else make this? I think they might, but it's not a shoo-in. It could get a JC release. You never know, it might even get an NG release, but I'd be a little surprised if it did. So I think this is showing good diversity from Phoenix. I think it's a decent choice. Again, and their mould is not the best 787, but it has been improved. And I'm going to put this one as well into High Flyer. And our last 787 of the month, this one actually comes with a photograph, not just a picture of the aircraft in service, but a picture of the actual finished model. So they must have this one pretty much ready to go. It's an Etihad 787-10 A6 Bravo Mike Golf. I believe this one's just on the standard scheme. When I look through the list of other Etihad 787s that we made, they're almost all wearing some form of special livery, which mostly isn't particularly exciting. But the Etihad base livery is pretty cool. It does look like Gemini made one of these in 2019 on the very good mould that they have. And that will probably be better than this version, even though Phoenix have made some changes. I'm not 100% about the cockpit windows either that I'm seeing here, but it's okay. I've also heard some people saying that they think Phoenix get the colours better on this Etihad scheme, and they could well be right. Colour's not really my forte. Despite all of that, it's not really exciting me much, this model. It looks fine, it'll be okay, but, you know, Etihad is Etihad. It's not TAAG Angola, is it? So I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse. Now we also have 4 further models to discuss outside of the Airbus and Boeing categories. The first one of those is a House Colours Comac C919. B001 Foxtrot is the registration. This has been made before a few times, but not for a little while. The most recent of these was from June 21 by NG. This same reg hasn't actually been made before, I was lying. But there have been lots of Comac House Colours C919s with similar regs. They made Alpha and Charlie have been made multiple times, and Delta by NG, JC Wings and Sky Wings. So there are quite a few older releases of this livery floating around, and you probably already own one. I know I do. Now, if we're talking moulds, I'm not 100% convinced by this new Phoenix mould. It's up against some incredibly strong competition. I've got both the Panda and the NG C919. They're almost impossible to tell apart, and I think that's just because they're so damn good. This Phoenix one, not quite as convinced. It isn't bad, but not quite as convinced. I'm going to put this one into workhorse, mainly because of subject matter and a little bit because of the mould. The next model is an IO 96-400, and we're gradually whittling down the relatively short list of possibilities with this mould, and this one is a Russian Air Force example. RA 96102 is the registration. The scheme isn't particularly beautiful because it's Russian Air Force, so they just don't have particularly nice liveries, but it does have, you know, the extra avionics hump attachment at the rear fuselage in front of the vertical stab, which makes it a little bit more interesting. It's not a model that I'm going to be buying, but it's really hard to say bad things about this IO 96-400 mold. It's really, really nice, and it's a really unusual and interesting type of aircraft. So big ups to Phoenix for making it in the first place. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the high flyer, but again, it's not really my subject. And we end on a couple of McDonnell Douglas products. The first one up is a Variglog MD11 freighter. PR Lima Golf Echo is the registration. Variglog, the cargo side of Varig at the time. It's a nice livery, and it's got these big Variglog tiles on the side of it, so it looks pretty cool. And it is interesting. I mean, no one else has made this. First up, I should say, there have been a few Varig MD11s, but none in this scheme. And that, you know, does add a lot of interest. And if this were on the Panda mold, I'd be really excited for it, and I might even be considering getting it. It isn't, though. It's on the Phoenix mold, which is old and doesn't really compete with the Panda one. But this is exactly the same issue that I was talking about with the 767 earlier on. Will Panda ever make a Variglog MD11? I seriously doubt it. And therefore, your question is the Phoenix MD11 good enough that you should buy this one if you want it? And the answer probably is yeah, it is. Probably is. So I don't think it's a model I'll be getting, but this is a case of where Phoenix have got the will to make models, but they don't necessarily have the molds, which is a shame. But it's still going to be a fine model, and it's not like the Phoenix MD11 is awful, it's just not great. So yeah, I'm going to put this one in the high flyer, even though it is on a mold which is obsolete, because I just don't see anyone else getting around to making it on a better mold anytime soon. Now the last model is something of a surprise, and this is a model which I really hope someone else does make soon, because it is a really, you know, it's a really iconic MD80 scheme. It's the first time we've seen a Phoenix MD80 for a long, long time. The last time they made one was in 2017, and prior to that they'd only made them from 2015 beforehand. So they have rediscovered this mould. This is going to be a Finnair version, OH Lima Mike Tango, in the classic cheat line Finnair scheme from the 1990s. And I should be really excited by this one, but I'm not entirely certain. And the reason is simply because the mould is not spectacular. Now, I've got a few Phoenix MD80s. The most recent one I got was a Jetsko on the second-hand market, and it looks okay, you know, but it's not great. It'll be interesting to see if the newer versions using this mould look better. But the nose is a little chunky, you know, the tail and the tail cone not quite as sharp as I'd like them to be. It's got a seam. It's, you know, it's okay, but it's not great. And you've obviously got the new NG version out there, which they're not using great, I admit. But surely this one should be on their list. Not sure what to do about this. I'm going to be generous and put it into high fly, and I am keen to see how it looks. But clearly, it's never going to be as good as the NG version. So that's a bit of a caveat there. But I can't say I'm unhappy to see it from Phoenix either. Okay, well that wraps up this month's Phoenix models. That's 21 new release announcements from Phoenix. And as I said at the start of the video, I am loving the diversity that Phoenix put out here. I mean, you've got Bolivia, the Maldives, Angola, Uzbekistan, Finland, Brazil. Excellent diversity of airlines, and you can only give them the highest praise for a lot of these release choices, which are excellent. But of course, the counterpoint to that, as I've said a few times, is that the molds that Phoenix are using are nowadays just not quite as good as they once were. Even good molds like the 767 and 777 have been overtaken by others, and then you've got some molds that really just need to be dumped, like 777-800, and a few others like the MD80 and MD11 here, which they're okay, but they're just nowhere near as good as the best in the business, which in this case is the Panda MD11 and the NG MD80. But Panda, NG, will they ever release these unusual airlines? Not sure. So Phoenix doing well, and this is still a great set, and there's some really nice models here, especially those A340s. Now, I do happen to know some little bit of news about Phoenix's next release set. I can't say too much, but I can tell you that there is going to be a really excellent couple of models announced on a new mold, and that is going to be super exciting. So stay tuned to see what Phoenix are coming up with in the next month's announcement set, because there's going to be a couple of really outstanding new releases in that set. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they come out, and I think there will be excellent additions to my collection. So pretty excited about that, and it does illustrate that Phoenix are doing new things and making new airliners and new molds, and hopefully that means that their mold set will catch up with the excellent diversity that we are seeing in these release announcements, because they are really good. Okay guys, well that's it from me for this month. I've really been enjoying looking at these Phoenix release sets, because there's a lot of good stuff here. I'm not sure who my next video will be for. It might be NG, because I see they've just put out some hints, but a very small number, so that should be a short vid. But keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you next time. But it's goodbye for now from Yesterday's Airlines. Thank you very much.